Good afternoon, everybody. So, we are here today to unpack a book that sits on the crossroads of history, mythology, science, faith, politics, storytelling, and a few other adjectives, which could easily be India on a busy day. So we are sitting here with the absolute right person to discuss that with because he has authored the Bharat series, and this is the eighth addition to a series called the Ayodhya.
For a moment, as a conspiracy thriller writer, I thought that there's a conspiracy behind this. Uh, but this is the eighth book, Shunali. The first book was a book called The Rosabal Line, which came out in 2008. Then there was a book called Chanakya's Chant in 2010. Then The Krishna Key in 2013. The Sialkot Saga in 2016. Keepers of the Kal Chakra in 2018, and The Vault of Vishnu in 2020, The Magicians of Mazda in 2022, and the Ayodhya Alliance in 2024. So I'm back like a bad penny.
You know, this kind of a bibliography, his body of work, is enough to make many writers here resign from their careers and leave for good because this is a man who industriously produces fantastic novels and even non-fiction actually year after year after year. And this is what I want to understand from him because with Bharat series in particular, it isn't a mere retelling, mythological retelling of legends. With his work, with your work, Ashwin, you are, one gets a sense that you're probing what happens when inherited memory collides with modern anxieties.
Mhm.
And just the whole premise, book after book after book, to come up with absolutely new stories. How do you do it?
So a peg of whiskey once in a while definitely helps. But beyond that, I would say that, I think, Shonali, the key is all of us have great ideas. And in fact, all of us are storytellers. All of us have stories to tell. It's just that when a great idea for a story or for a sub theme within a story strikes us, at that moment, most of us don't end up capturing it. And I think that's what makes me different, that I'm always capturing ideas. So I have an email account to which no one else knows that email ID. I send an email to myself whenever I can. And over the years, I've sent about 12 or 15,000 emails to myself. That includes YouTube video links, it could include PDF documents, it could include the links to an interesting website, or the snapshot of a page from a book that I'm reading, or a question that has been asked by Shunali during the course of a
Gold
discussion.
mine for a hacker here. You can build an entire career from this.
So I think capturing those ideas is the critical thing to do, because then when I need to work on a book, I go back to my idea bank and they are already there. Then it's just a question of sifting.
That is actually such an important tip and such a helpful tip.
And all our ancestors used to maintain diaries and journals. What was that? It was it's gone out of fashion. So, and probably maybe in some ways one needs now the help of technology to make that more workable. But if effectively all I do is maintain a journal.
But you also run a very successful business, and I believe you're increasingly spending more time in writing novels. Is that right?
2007 or 8, I was a I was a businessman who was trying to be a writer. Now I'm a writer who sometimes occasionally tries to be a businessman. Uh, but for those who are sort of new to my work as such, my entire training was a business training. My father is a Marwadi from Jodhpur. and my mother is a Banya from Kanpur. So that's a very deadly combination. Uh, it means that, I had written a book called The Vault of Vishnu. In The Vault of Vishnu, there's a very interesting anecdote about the merchants of Samarkand. And the merchants of Samarkand had a very interesting tradition that when a child was born, they would touch a drop of honey to the tongue of the child and they would touch a drop of glue to the palm of the child. The idea being that when he grew up, he would have a sweet tongue that could sell commodities to anyone. And he would have a sticky palm so that coins would stick to his palm. So that was the sort of upbringing that I had as a banya. That listen, uh, my father started sending me into work to our factories, etc., at age 12. And we had a Munimji who was also from Jodhpur. He used to wear a topi and a dhoti and kurta. And he used to teach me the traditional way of accounting, the Bahi Khata. So he would teach me that. And my maternal granduncle, who lived in Kanpur, he was very fond of reading. So he had this habit of sending me a book every week to read. So I would always have whatever was the latest book in my hand. And Munimji would say that the only two words that you need in your life are debit and credit. You don't need to have a vocabulary which is beyond debit and credit. And if you must spend your time reading something, then read a balance sheet. It'll get you somewhere. So, I mean, that part of my cultural upbringing is still very much there in me. But for the last 15 or 17 years, I've been a storyteller, and of which the last about 8 or 10 years has been a full-time thing. So I'm no longer involved in the business anymore. Thankfully so.
Well, it's literature's gain. Uh, I wanted to ask you about your new book, the Ayodhya Alliance. What was the genesis of the idea? How did it happen? When did it happen?
So we still have 40 minutes
Yeah,
apparently.
actually, I was going
The
to say this. Guys,
hello guys.
time has stopped for Ashwin
Guys,
Sanghi.
the timer is not working, so we are assuming we still have another 40 minutes. So, yeah, the Ayodhya Alliance actually came up from a thought, which was that there are many stories, Sonali, which have been lost to us in India, but they are still very well preserved in other geographies. So, for example, you take a book like, let's say, The Magicians of Mazda. The arrival of the Zoroastrians on the shores of Gujarat in 720 CE is not very well documented within the historical narratives of India. But the Kissai Sanjan, which is a Zoroastrian chronicle, has a beautiful account of the arrival of the Zoroastrians in the 8th century. Similarly, for example, when I was writing The Vault of Vishnu, it was primarily in order to do with Bodhi Dharma. Now, you ask the average Indian that have you heard of Bodhi Dharma? Chances are 8 out of 10 will ask you, are you referring to the Buddhist faith? Bodh Dharma. But they will not necessarily connect it back to an individual called Bodhidharma, who was a Pallava prince who traveled in the 600s all the way to China via the sea route of Cambodia and eventually ended up at a monastery which is now famous as Shaolin, where he continued to meditate in a cave outside Shaolin for 9 years till he was granted admission. And that particular monk eventually took yogic breathing and yoga and Silambam and Kalari Payattu, two ancient South Indian martial arts, and eventually combined them into a training routine for the monks, which eventually came to be known as Kung Fu. So, the point I'm making is that these are now stories which we have lost sight of in India. The story of Ayodhya Alliance is again one such story where we have lost sight of the fact that there is a Korean chronicle known as the Samguk Yusa, which is about probably a 14th century chronicle, which talks about a great king in Korea in the Gaya Confederacy. And this king's name was Kim Suro. And the unique thing about Kim Suro was that he married a princess who apparently came to Korea from Ayodhya. Ayutha. Now, of course, when you read the book, you would realize that there are multiple versions of that. But the point is that she traveled 42 CE, that's about 2000 odd years ago, to Korea, married Kim Suro, and they had 10 children together. And the vast majority of South Koreans who have the surname Kim trace their lineage back to this royal couple. Now, vast majority of us have not heard this story.
But how did you hear this story? That is my question.
Because I went to Ayodhya.
Yeah.
And in Ayodhya, there is a park on the banks of the Saryu Nadi. And that park is known as Ram Katha Park. And a part of that park, about an acre or two, has been carved out, where there is a memorial. And that memorial is a stone tablet. Now, of course, in the last few years, it has been done up as a separate park on its own. But otherwise, till very recently, it was just a stone tablet, which talked about the story of this woman by the name of Suri Ratna, who went from Ayodhya to Korea. And hundreds of Korean tourists come there every year in order to pay their respects to their ancestral queen.
The park has been gifted to India by the South Korean government, hasn't it?
The park is, of course, part of the Indian government only, but the original memorial, the stone tablet, came from Korea. And now, of course, if you go there in its current avatar, there is a beautiful marble structure on one side representing the India story. And on the other side, there is a wooden slatted roof structure representing the Korea story. And there is a beautiful bridge that connects the two, along with an expanse of water in the center with a ship in between. So
imagine so many people have been to Ayodhya. I have been myself, but no, I'm not the kind of explorer you are. But I have never heard of this park from anybody else either. So is this how you do your travel and tourism?
So the point is that for me, even a trip that would otherwise be a sort of a write-off is a trip which I will always utilize to the best of my capacity. So, for example, when I had, in 2002, I had gone to Kashmir to attend someone's wedding, and my flight the next day got cancelled. And because that flight got cancelled, I got out with the driver. And of course, I had been to Kashmir probably 10, 15 times before that in my life. So all the other places that he recommended to me, I said no to because I'd already been there several times. But then he said, do you want to go to Rosabal? And that's how I ended up going to Rosabal, seeing the place. And then the audience out here may not be necessarily aware. At that time, of course, Rosabal was a very, very simple tomb, maybe around 15 odd feet on each side, whitewashed walls, and there is a sarcophagus with the head pointing towards Makkah that originally contains a 13th century peer by the name of Nasiruddin. But what is fascinating is that the local land records indicate that that particular location has stood there from 112 AD. So it's almost about 2000 years old. And underneath the burial of Nasiruddin, there is an earlier burial. And that burial is not with the head pointing towards Mecca. That is along an east-west axis, which is very similar to the burial traditions of the ancient Jews. And outside the tomb, there is a carving which indicates a pair of human feet. And those human feet have little marks indicating where the nails for a crucifixion would have been applied. And so the local folklore around that location is that the person who came there and lies buried there is none other than
Christ.
Yuz Asaf, someone they call Yuz Asaf or Isa Masih or Yeshua or Jesus Christ. So Uh, that struck me as fascinating. And then I ended up doing 2 years worth of research on that particular location, and then eventually writing a book on it. Unfortunately, because of my book,
Oh my God,
uh,
yes.
the the next year, the Lonely Planet Guide actually referred to that location and said that this is the final resting place
Of
of
Christ.
Christ, as per Ashwin Sanghi in his book, The Rosabal Line. And a lot of people started going there. That ended up causing a lot of consternation to locals. And then eventually it ended up getting closed.
Yes.
And then I think you can probably narrate your incident,
So
what happened to
about
you.
a year or two after his book came out, I read it, and I was in Kashmir. It was still in ferment back then. Not many people were traveling to Kashmir, and I asked my hotel people to take me to the Rosabal shrine. He's exactly right that in English it says over here that there's a belief that these are Christ is buried here, and the other side says that there's a famous Pir, like a Sufi saint, entombed here. But they have sealed the shrine now because it brought in so many curious tourists questioning the local belief that I dealt with some mild levels of violence there when I asked a local youngster who was, starting his motorbike, and he looked like a 31, 32 years old. And I said, so what is your personal belief? And he said, I'm going to stone you if you don't leave this place right away. And so I had to flee from there. But then I learned also that Pakistan, in the part that now Pakistan has occupied, there's a place called Murray,
Yeah.
which is named after Mary Magdalene.
Don't call it Murray.
It's
Call it
Murray.
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 It is Murray.
But they call it Murray, sorry.
So
Murray.
which means, I'll tell you, the Murray comes from
Murree.
two things. One is the legend is that when Jesus was fleeing after post crucifixion, he came through that border area. Of course, that border didn't exist, but Mother Mary was with him, and she was old, and she died at that spot. And as a result of which, there is a burial there, which is attributable to Mother Mary. And of course, she also died there. So the name Mary and the fact that she died there, Murray, as a result of which that place is now known as Murray.
Very interesting. But coming back to Ayodhya, Ashwin, see, Ayodhya isn't just a place, as we know. It's a psychological and, if I may say so, political fault line. While writing this story that you did, and with so much balance, did you have to exercise some restraint or caution in ensuring that you don't, sort of cross lines? Which you haven't, but how did you manage?
But Shunali, the truth of the matter is that if you have a great story to tell, then honestly, the lines should not be holding you back. Yes, I believe that if you are crossing lines for the heck of causing sensationalism, then that's not a line worth crossing, because then that means you're just simply attempting to get either a few more thousand sales on the book, or you're attempting to simply grab some cheap attention. On the other hand, if there is a great story and that story requires you to cross certain lines, then frankly, if the story demands it, then cross it.
Your novel, all of them actually, but this one in particular, spans timelines, centuries actually, back and forth. And it's starting in Ayodhya, it travels to Balochistan, and there's South Korea, there is Saudi Arabia,
Yeah.
and of course there's the southern part of India. What kind of research went into, because everything is in depth, and this is what I find most fascinating, writer to writer, is your world creation. And while it may be easy to create one sort of a world, but you're creating many worlds parallelly existing at different times. And I really wanted to get inside your head, which 40 minutes aren't enough for that, but to understand what is your process, what is the process of putting it all together and your research?
So for me, it's actually there is nothing remotely romantic or emotional about my process. As I mentioned, I always capture ideas. The moment that I plan to write another book, I go back to my idea bank, figure out which are the 3 or 4 most dependable ideas that I can pull out from that hat. Once, then I mull over those ideas for a month or two. Because honestly speaking, I know that any book in the Bharat collection is going to take me 2 years or 2.5 years to get it across the finish line. And in some ways, it's almost like committing to a marriage, no? Because you're going to have to live with that story idea for the next 2 years or 2.5 years. So what you don't want is to pick up a story idea and then 8 months down the line say, this is no longer exciting me. So it must keep you excited till the very end. And if I am not excited about the idea, there's no way that my reader can be excited with it. So that's number one. Once I have the idea, then I work on a research plan. That what do I need to find out in order to be able to do justice to this story? And the nature of the research will vary. So, for example, let's say a book like Chanakya's Chant. Frankly, all that I needed to do was read the Arthashastra.
And Kanpur, anyway, I saw a lot of echoes of what you just shared about your childhood in there, right?
Yeah, of course. So Kanpur was easy. And since it was a political thriller, and we were living through the times of 2009, 2010, so there were scandals in the newspapers every morning. So I had enough raw material on the political front, present day, did a reading of the Arthashastra, and of course, did a reading of a Sanskrit play known as the Mudra Rakshas. And then, of course, I was able to piece together the story of the ancient Chanakya and the modern day Chanakya. A book like the Krishna Key started with a reading of the Kalki Puran, but then I realized that I wanted to actually piece together the ancient Krishna story. And I realized that simply doing a reading of the Bhagavad Gita will not cut it. I need to read that in any case. But probably beyond that, a reading of the Mahabharata and then maybe visiting places like Dwarka, Mathura, Vrindavan, and so on and so forth in order to be able to pick up details which other people may miss.
So you actually visit all these places?
Depends.
And even for you went to South Korea, clearly.
But that was much before I wrote the book. But I had already been to King Suro's tomb in Ayodhya. Not in Ayodhya, in Gimhae in Korea. And then that particular visit, which had happened, ended up getting sparked when I went to Ayodhya and I saw Suri Ratna's tomb. But the nature of research for each book will be different. So a book like, let's say, the Sialkot Saga is the story of two individuals post 1947 coming up to 2010. All I wanted was a backdrop for each of those individuals. So I wanted to talk to people who had lived through the 1950s, 60s, 70s. So, for example, in case, let's say, there was a character in the book who was, taking his girlfriend out for a meal, then what would have been the hotspot in Kolkata in 1965, where they would have gone? So, in other words, that is not something that you are going to be able to pull out of a history book. So, your research plan will depend upon what type of book or story you're attempting. Once I'm done with that, then I get into the research phase, which is typically anywhere between 9 months to 12 months. I will studiously get through the material and also build a filing system where all of the relevant material can be accessed at one place. The next 3 months, typically, developing a plot outline. The plot outline has to be detailed enough for me to know exactly how the story begins, ends, and what are the twists and turns in between. And how will those chapters be crafted so that you don't turn the page, but the page turns itself. And finally, of course, I would say the easiest part is writing, which is about 6 months. Because you already have the research, you already have the plot outline.
Set your ducks in a row,
So now it's only a question of fleshing it out.
Yeah.
The most difficult part is probably the rewriting,
Yeah.
which is about 3 months or 4 months. I will normally work through at least 2 or 3 drafts before it goes to the editor. So that's pretty much it. It's like a production line almost.
But that's what it is, you know, to be a successful writer. I think just having talent and sitting in front of your laptop isn't enough. I think this kind of writing rigor that you have, which is why you bring out books almost in an industrial manner, as you said yourself, and yet each one of them clicks with your readership. So it's fascinating. It's also enviable because I for sure don't have that. But
No,
it's a great tip for aspiring writers.
But Shunali, having said that, you know, to each his own.
Yes.
Because not everyone has the same sort of stories that I want to narrate.
Yeah.
And to a certain extent, I think there are also those people who want to tell stories which may not necessarily be coming out every year or every 2 years.
Of course.
They may not necessarily be read by a few 100,000 people. But the entire process of being able to put that story on paper and have it eventually come out and be read by a few thousand people and be talked about, that in itself is something to be proud about. So, as I always say, different strokes for different folks. Thank you.
So, coming back to the Ayodhya Alliance, in this novel, you know, I see that you're championing a sort of balance over absolutism. So there is faith versus science, there is tradition versus modernity, and of course there is Shiva versus Vishnu.
Yeah.
And you do it very beautifully and seamlessly. Do you believe that India's greatest threat today is that in our daily life and conversations, we are losing this equilibrium?
No, I think what is happening increasingly, and this is not just an India story, it's happening everywhere.
Of course.
That increasingly, you know, I don't know whether in physics, we used to do that experiment with 2 electrodes on either side, a positive and a negative terminal, and with some metal shavings in the middle. And then you apply a current to the 2 electrodes. And you will see that the shavings are moving towards both sides. But as you eventually ramp up the current, there is no electrode, there is no shaving left in the middle. That middle ground stops existing. The shavings have either moved to the left or they've moved to the right.
Polarized, yeah.
And as I like always saying, that, unfortunately, on the right, there is very little that's right.
Yeah.
And on the left, there is not much left. So,
very well said.
As a result of which, that discussion ground for something which could be possibly balanced and nuanced, that is now missing in all narratives. So whether it is you put on the US television and look at Fox News, or nowadays increasingly whether you get onto social media, the middle ground has shrunk tremendously.
Yeah.
And I think those are the discussions which we need to be having. That isn't it possible that someone like me believes that we need to look at the cutting edge of science without losing our philosophical roots? What is wrong if I write a book like Keepers of the Kal Chakra, where I say that, look, a lot of the inspiration for modern quantum theory has probably come from Vedanta or the Upanishads, which is a fact.
Yeah.
But now, if you decide to read that book with a particular lens, you will say that, listen, iska to naam hi Sanghi hai, so he must be a bhakt.
It's true.
So the point
but
is...
even with Ayodhya Alliance, there is central to the story is the Daitva Lingam, which is made of the same metal that the pillar, the Kutab Minar pillar is made of. And thanks to his book, I learned that it cannot easily be, it can be dented, but it can't be ruptured,
Yeah.
even with cannons, as happened with Nadir
With
Shah.
Nadir Shah,
Right?
absolutely.
And then with your novels, one doesn't know where history and mythology suddenly gently bleeds into
No,
fiction,
that's
right?
partly on account of the fact that during my growing up years, my mother always said that I was a bloody good liar. So,
You are.
which so
She's right.
the with these sort of novels within the Bharat collection, they, as fiction writers, we know that we are telling a lie.
Right.
So the fiction is obviously a lie.
Yes.
But the corollary to that is that if you're going to tell a lie, then tell it close to the truth.
Exactly.
So then it makes the lie that much
But
more
which is very
believable.
perplexing for the reader. So I
Yeah.
Googled, because he's speaking about this metal that was made like 2000 years ago, and that laboratories even today are not being able to recreate.
Wood steel.
Wood steel. And then apparently it's true. So all those conversations that one hears, which of course take on a very, very different kind of a tenor, unpleasant tenor sometimes, but if you were to listen to them without sort of taking the mask of judgment out of it and just giving a pleasant hearing
Yeah.
to that person, some of this stuff is really true. Thousands of years ago, it was already done.
Yeah.
Although recently someone said that why do we need a Concorde? India had Pushpak Viman. Now that is a bit ridiculous.
No. So that's where I'm coming from. That the problem is the extremes always result in what is even, like, for example, today I think we do need to be conscious about the fact that we gave the world the concept of a nullity, the concept of zeroness. Shunyata is a concept that we gave. uh, I think we need to be conscious of the fact that we had figured out in the very, very early years the speed of light. We had figured out the distance between the sun and the earth. There were many, many great discoveries, including cataract surgery, which can be correctly attributed to ancient India and that we can be proud of. Does that mean that we don't strive to be at the cutting edge now? No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that, listen, we can be proud of our past and we can also move towards the future. And does that also mean that everything that was of relevance came from India? No. The problem is that we've now got this polarized situation where either if it came from India, then it means that it had to be relevant, or if it came from Bharat, it means it had to be utterly irrelevant. Why?
And if you speak for our civilizational past, you are a Sanghi. Literally.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, we have a few seconds left. My last question to you before we open it up to the audience is that your bedside reading rack, is it full of Purans and scriptures and Aryabhatta, or what do you read on a normal day?
So on a normal day, I don't read actually, because whenever I'm working on projects, at that point of time, the only reading that I'm doing is the reading. A book like, let's say, for example, the Rosabal line required me to read about 40 books before I could write the Rosabal line. The same happened with, let's say, a book like the Sialkot Saga, or a book like Keepers of the Kal Chakra required me to read books on quantum theory, which I, as a non-science student, found very difficult to do. So while I'm working on a project, typically my reading will be specifically focused on the project that I'm working on. However, in the event that I'm in between books and I'm not,
For like 2 days.
yeah, well, no,
2 days in between books.
It turns out sometimes to be a little longer also. My the sort of reading that I grew up with, Shunali, was 180 degrees to each other. My maternal granduncle would be sending me books like, let's say, for example, at age 12 or 13, I received Autobiography of a Yogi. I tried reading it when I was very young. I couldn't read it. Then it was a few years before I again went back to it and was able to read it. Or, for example, Raja Gopalchari's Mahabharat Retold, Freedom at Midnight by Dominique Lapierre, or, for example, Midnight's Children, Salman Rushdie. All of those were books that Nanaji sent me. On the other hand, my mother was always into commercial mass market fiction. So whatever was the latest Jeffrey Archer, Sidney Sheldon, Ian Fleming, Frederick Forsyth, you name it, Dan Brown, all of that used to come to me as hand-me-downs from her. So I think what ended up happening is that I am this anda bhurji of sorts, where my material, what excites me materially, is the content that I obtained from Nanaji's books. On the other hand, what I like stylistically are commercial mass market fiction thrillers, where it's almost like a beautifully pakawed khichdi, where your system doesn't need to digest it, it just works. So in that sense, I'm very proud to call myself a vada pav or a Big Mac. You don't need to think about it too much.
There's so much modesty in there. But at that note, we are going to open it up to the audience. All right, we have time for about 3-4 questions. So, you in the front, please. Yes. And may I request everybody, when you ask Ashwin a question, just ask a question.
Yeah, sure. Your writing spans two very divergent genres, historical fiction and thrillers, and on the other hand, self-improvement books which have benefited millions of people, myself included. Now, in today's times, our younger generation is facing a huge deluge, a tsunami of toxic cyber content from a variety of devices. Don't you think a book on this line is high time, should be coming from you?
A book on
Parenting, control of cyber devices, control exercise by parents, control exercise, self-control exercise by the youngsters.
You know, sir, my life has been a story of lack of self-control in every way. So I think I'm probably the last person who can give any advice to anyone, because if there is a bad habit, it probably resides in Ashwin Sanghi. But having said that, a dear friend of Shunali's is a lady called Kiran Mandral. She and I did write a book on parenting, which was actually more as a book, not as a preachy sort of guide that you should do this, you should do that. But I find that in most things, if we can go back to applying our common sense, that when a child arrives on earth, it doesn't come with a warranty booklet and an instruction manual. You have to figure out what the buttons are and how to make it work. So I think that is what we've tried to do with a lot of these sort of 13 steps guides, where we try and explain to you what could be the common sense path to trying to figure it out, you know.
Ma'am, you out here, to the left.
When I'm reading your book, so how do I differentiate what is fiction and what is actual research that you've done?
He just answered that, but please carry on.
No, it's a relevant question, because I think I've said this story before, but nonetheless, many years ago I was in Calcutta for a lecture, and I had some time to kill, so I told my driver, I said, take me to some mandir. So he decided to take me to a mandir. It was a very ordinary looking temple. In fact, it didn't even look like a temple. I walked in. There was a green colored throne in the middle of that temple, and there were people praying. And when I looked closely on that green colored throne, there was a portrait of Amitabh Bachchan. So I realized that the guy, in all his simplicity, had brought me to an Amitabh temple created by his fans. And genuinely, they were serious about it. There was aarti going on and all of that. I went downstairs waiting for my car, trying to still wrap my head around it. This little boy came up to me, and he had a basket containing different things that would be needed when you go to the temple. Agarbatti, phool, patta, coconut, prasad, all of that. Amongst those, he also sold me one little booklet known as the Amitabh Chalisa. Now, that book is still with me, by the way. But when I was waiting for the car, I thought to myself, I said, Ashwin, supposing the car that is coming for you, the driver is coming at a high speed and he loses control of the car, he knocks you down, you die on the spot, and as per karmic theory, you take rebirth 1,000 years later. And 1,000 years later, the worship of Amitabh has really caught on. And now there isn't one temple dedicated to Amitabh Bachchan, but probably 1 lakh or 10 lakh temples. And someone asks you, do you think that this could have been a historical figure? Now, I visualize myself asking that question about Ram or Krishna. That would you have written 300 versions of an epic called the Ramayana in case there wasn't a kernel of truth? Now, that brings me to the question of what is truth. And that's something that we can spend probably, oh God, a few hours discussing what is the nature of truth. But I think two definitions that I love. One is C.S. Lewis, who talks about mythology. And he says a myth is a lie that reveals a truth. And on the other hand, there is George Santayana, who talks about history. And he says history is a pack of lies about events that never happened, written by people who were never there. So, how much of my history is a narrative, and how much of my myth is a reality? That's what I try and discover. Thankfully, I write in the world of fiction, so I don't have to try and highlight the passages for you. That listen, this is from my research, and this is by Mirch Masala that I've added on.
I think one quick last question and then we'll call it a day here. Sir, you at the extreme right.
Acharya Mudit ji.
My question is, which country has India traded with in the most antiquity of time? Is it Korea or was it China? I mean, the Cholas were there in the Southeast Asia.
So if you read the accounts of Pliny the Elder, he bemoans the fact that the greatest trade deficit that the Roman Empire has is with India, because of the fact that so much of gold is getting drained away from the Roman Empire. And in fact, if you look at South India in particular, all the ancient archaeological sites, the wealth of archaeological material that is from Rome is incredible, whether it is coins, amphoras, wine casks, you name it, all of it has been discovered in large quantities. So and then of course, we also have to look at the cultural aspect, Mudit, because just go down Southeast Asia and you see the influence, whether it is the kings of Thailand calling themselves Rama and adopting the Garuda as their symbol, or whether it is the puppet dance in Malaysia, or whether it is the 300 versions, including versions of the Ramayana which deviate from the original but maintain the essence. It indicates that all of those ideas, or Angkor Wat in Cambodia, all of that could not have happened without trade.
Is a JLF team? Do I have time for one more? Okay, sure. Oh, you're from the team. Sorry, yes, thank you. One last question. Okay, you here, right to the right.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So with mythology, there are too many retellings and too many rewritings. Each version is different. So for a writer like you, does that materialize into a challenge, or it is actually a blessing in disguise?
Oh, it's a big time blessing in disguise, because you have so much more material to work with. See, for example, if I looked at, let's say, the Valmiki Ramayana, then Ram comes across as a great king, but an ordinary human of sorts. By the time I move to the Tulsi Ramayana, he has become the Vishnu avatar and has taken on a much more godlike personality. But now, if I look at, let's say, something like the Anand Ramayana, then the abduction that takes place is not of the original Sita, but an illusion of Sita. By the time I go to the Adbhut Ramayana, the killing of Ravan is not done by Ram, it is done by Sita, who takes on a manifestation of Durga. If I go to the Mapilla Malabar, the Muslim Ramayana, Ram is a sultan. If I go to the Jatak Ramayana, then Ram is a bodhisattva. So the point I'm making is that rather than having one story to work with, I have 300 to work with. The only thing, which basically implies that I can pick and choose material for my fiction. But yes, the one thing that I always do is I try and always give you the source at the end of my book so that you can go back and see what that source says.
All right, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ashwin. I think the greatest takeaway from this conversation and your work is the whole Bharat series is that a civilization that forgets its intellectual memory cannot reclaim its power. So
So true. Thank you.